My name is Susan Price. I'm one of the editors of Green Left. I'm also a member of Socialist Alliance, and I want to welcome you here to this panel. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on stolen land, wherever we happen to be located across Australia and many parts of the world, but certainly here in Australia, sovereignty was never ceded by the First Nations, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'm personally coming to you from the land of the Baramatagal people of the Darug Nation. Pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'd also like to pay respects to any First Nations comrades who are joining us here tonight. Well, this evening's session marks the beginnings of Ecosocialism 2021, a conference with 3 days of workshops and panels featuring local and international speakers. And this is the second such conference that we've held, and it's something that we are planning to become an annual event. The conference is co-hosted by Green Left and Socialist Alliance. For those of you who are not familiar with Green Left is a social change project, a media project that aims to build movements of resistance as well as put forward an anti-capitalist, eco-socialist political alternative. And by providing a space for progressive ideas and debates, Green Left links up the issues, the campaigns, and also activists, and lets people know how they can get involved, join with others in taking action to change the world. And we're certainly encouraging everyone who's tuned in tonight to become a supporter of Green Left. It is a reader-supported project, and you can do that for as little as $5 a month and contribute to this very important radical social change media project. Socialist Alliance is a party, Australian-based party that's obviously by its name. Socialist stands for a democratic society run for and by working people, not the greedy, destructive capitalist elite that now rules. We put people and the planet before profit and the billions ahead of the billionaires. Socialist Alliance is basically made up of people just like you and me, people who are sick and tired of being ruled by the warmongers, the racists, the union bashers, and the capitalist politicians. In order to stand in the next federal election, which will be coming up soon, Socialist Alliance needs your support. If you're not already a member, we encourage you to sign up to help us achieve 1,500 members nationally in order to ensure that our name appears on the ballot paper at the next election. You can do that by visiting our website, and I'm sure there'll be a slide popping up soon to let you know how to get to Socialist Alliance's website. And we want to ensure that there's an anti-capitalist voice at the next election. Okay, so this evening's session is being streamed live on Facebook and also Green Left's YouTube channel for free. And welcome to all those people who are tuning in on those platforms. If you'd like to participate in the rest of the conference tomorrow and Sunday, you will need to register, and registration costs starts from as little as $5. So we'd encourage you to do that, particularly if you like what you see and hear tonight. Join us for the rest of the discussions which are happening over the weekend. And to do that, go to our conference website, ecosocialism.org.au. Okay, so now I'm just hoping that we've got all of our speakers with us. Can just give a quick call out to see whether Brid Smith has joined us yet. If you can just indicate in the chat, Brid, if you're with us. Or maybe if someone spots Brid joining the Zoom, if you could just let me know on the chat, that would be terrific. Okay, so we've got, well, basically to start with our panel, This is entitled Capitalism in Crisis, Eco-Socialist Feminists Speak Out. Across the world, there's been a rise in campaigns for women's rights, but I guess as we've all been soberly reminded by the shameful legacy of the Western invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, capitalism and imperialism cannot deliver liberation of women and certainly not of humanity, but that it has to come from popular struggle. And this evening, we're going to hear from 3 activists involved in vital struggles in different parts of the world, resisting the environmental and socially destructive system that is capitalism. Capitalism in an imperialist epoch threatens the very basis of life on Earth. And in all the struggles that you'll hear about tonight, women are playing a central role in fighting for both their own rights, but also the rights of all humanity. In fact, for humanity's very survival. So we are going to hear tonight from 3 speakers. Firstly, we're going to hear from Kavita Krishnan. Kavita is a leader of the Communist Party of India Marxist-Leninist Liberation. She is also the secretary of the All India Progressive Women's Association and is a participant in the farmers' struggles against the Narendra Modi regime and many other important campaigns. We're also going to hear from Brid Smith. Brid is a People Before Profit Solidarity member of the Irish Parliament with a record as a trade unionist, abortion rights campaigner and anti-war activist. And we're also very pleased to welcome Nilüfer. Nilüfer is the Kurdistan National Congress External Affairs Commission spokesperson, and we're very pleased to have Nilüfer here with us, and very pleased to have both Kavita and Brid with us too. I guess just to say that tomorrow there will be sessions on starting at 11 a.m. Australian Daylight Savings Time. If you're here in Australia, the panel that we'll be kicking off with tomorrow is Why Ecosocialism, the Global Fight for a Red-Green Future, which promises to be an amazing panel of speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you now and throw over to Kavita Krishnan. And Kavita, we're so pleased to have you with us. So everyone, welcome Kavita. You can do this or use the clap icon on your screen, but over to you, Kavita. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Socialist Alliance. It's an extremely important time to be having this conversation, and it's so good that you have organized it right now and allowed us all to meet in this fashion around the world and discuss these issues. So I'll get right down to it. I think that there can be nothing more important right now than the need to nurture an eco-socialist feminist politics of resistance against capitalism and imperialism. And the ways I want to use my time today to highlight some of the important struggles that we are seeing in India, which are eco-socialist in their spirit and to some extent even in their planned ideology and perspective on the world, and what they are up against here in terms of the Indian regime itself right now, as well as in terms of globalization and the forces of neoliberal capitalism that are dictating economic policy and so on. So I think that, of course, there are a whole range of other issues also that make this discussion important right now. I don't want to take a lot of time discussing that, but just to sketch a quick outline. All around the world, I think that we are seeing this rise of a resurgence of right-wing authoritarian and bigoted politics. So racism and a politics of hatred and violence against minorities. This has become, now whether or not elections are won, in America, Trump and his supporters lost the election, and that's important. I'm not one to at all say that that was not an important achievement. I think it was. But at the same time, I think, and that achievement was due in very large part, I think, to organizing by, grassroots organizing by, among other people, feminists, Black feminists, and so on. But I think that in addition to this, you can't ignore the fact that even in the US, where Trump lost the election, the fact that he polled so highly means that, the inroads that have been made by that very dangerous brand of politics are there. And we cannot simply heave a sigh of relief and think, all right, at least he's out. And the fact, of course, is that even with him out, even with the Democrats in power, there is, the reach of that brand of politics is so high, and it to some extent, it goes beyond this two-party kind of divide. And so you see a continuation of racist, imperialist policies, of policies that impact not only the poor and minority communities in the US, but across the world, right? And we bear the burden of those policies. Afghanistan, of course, is a case in point, where the very purpose of the invasion was set to be, liberating Afghanistan's women and so on. And what you see right now is not just, is in a sense a terrible situation where the Taliban is in power. And while America's exit, we have been for the last 20 years fighting on the streets, protesting on the streets, demanding an end to the US occupation. But the manner of the end is that it comes with a US pact with the Taliban. And in a sense, it is almost a transfer of power to the Taliban. And with the Taliban in power now, you are seeing Afghan school girls being prevented from going to school, Afghan professional women being prevented from going to their jobs, as well as a whole spate of targeted violence against Afghan citizens who are seen as being in favor of a democracy. Especially feminists in Afghanistan are very, very vulnerable right now. And I think that the ease with which so many who are in power in the world, who hold power across the world and claim to stand for democracy and have even, waged wars in the name of, exporting democracy. They are guilty right now of rationalizing, legitimizing this regime. And not only that, I think, it's a larger conversation, perhaps not for this session, but I think that even on the left, I'm disturbed to see the tendency to basically play down the dangers of the Taliban in power and what that means for Afghanistan's women. So I think it is perfectly possible to welcome the end of the US occupation while being absolutely unbridled in our, and calling a spade in our solidarity with Afghan women and Afghan citizens who are facing the brunt of having this extremely reactionary, anti-minority and misogynist force in power. So any playing down of that, I think, is dangerous. So in that situation, what does an eco-socialist politics look like globally as well as in the specific arenas that we occupy? I think that I'll try and shed some light on it by sharing some of the struggles that we are waging in India right now. One, of course, which is most pertinent right now, is a very remarkable struggle that has gone on for it's 9 months running now. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary. Next month will 9 months, no more than that. So I think next month, 26th of November, will mark the 1-year anniversary of a very remarkable farmers movement in India. against three farm laws that the Modi government got passed in parliament. I won't say enacted because it was pushed through in parliament by a voice vote that ignored the demand to actually put the laws to a vote, because in one of the houses of parliament, in the upper house of parliament, the regime was actually in a minority. And so the laws would not have been passed. They would have been, sent back for greater scrutiny and told to take on board the criticisms that the farmers are making of those laws. But those laws were pushed through, and they have been imposed on India's farmers. And the farmers in India have been in protest ever since. Now, what those laws are doing and why women are a very significant section of protesters, who are leading these protests, is something that I will quickly try to summarize. Well, what the law does is basically, it's not that India's current farming regime is actually, whatever existed before these laws was absolutely perfect. Very far from it. You still had agrarian crisis on a huge scale, especially in the last 30 years of neoliberal politics. You have had farmers committing suicide. So nothing was rosy at any rate. But the solution that farmers were demanding was the absolute opposite of what these laws mean. So farmers were demanding greater support for, they were demanding a minimum support price. They were demanding various safeguards, publicly funded safeguards from, for disasters and so on. They were demanding that they be allowed to retain and, that control over seeds, control over crops, control be restored to them, because there was this continuous push towards handing over that control to corporations and so on. But for the last 30 years, farmers had been resisting a complete sort of corporatization of farm policy. And they had been demanding instead a far greater state investment and state support for farmers. What these laws essentially mean is exactly that offer peace completely all over the country. What you're going to have, what these laws usher in, is a total ceding, total snatching of control from the Indian farmer and handing over of control to the large agribusiness corporations of the world and India, of course. And so what these do is, and these impact not just farmers, but consumers as well. Because, for instance, what these farm laws do is that they take various farm produce items off the list of essential commodities. That includes very important food commodities, which are consumed, which means that these items will no longer, they will be essentially, their pricing will be left to the market. So they, till now, to at least a considerable extent, these items had to be sold at a restricted price through the ration shops in the country, where, at one point, rations, free rations, subsidized rations were universal, but subsequent governments have been cutting down on that. But at least, yes, a substantial section could expect to get those products at a restricted price. Not only that, farmers could then be quite sure that the state would procure these farm items to be sold in the ration shops for sure. So state procurement would be guaranteed. The farmer would not have to worry that their produce will just lie, that they would have to somehow find a market for it on time before the produce rots, right? Because the state had this thing to produce it. This is now gone. And so this is one huge reason why the farmers are protesting. There are other issues. I won't go into all of them. But why are women farmers at the, it's interesting because when the farm laws protests began, then it was at the peak of winter. And the Chief Justice of India, the former Chief Justice of India, who was Chief Justice then at the time, he was known to be a sort of, rubber stamp for the regime. And he was hearing a bunch of petitions on the new farm laws, and he asked in open court, why are women being kept in the protest? And he advised that women be sent back home. And women immediately protested, saying, with slogans and placards in several Indian languages at the protest sites, because basically what the farmers were doing is they were surrounded the city of Delhi, and they have been sitting in sit-ins there at 3 of the borders surrounding Delhi, India's capital city, for all these months, right? Almost 1 year. So these, the women farmers protested there with signs saying women's place is in the in the protest, is in the movement. Our place is not in the home, and we are not being kept here by anybody. We have chosen to protest. And one thing to remember here is that 80% of farm produce in India, food in India, is produced by women farmers. 75% of those who actually work on farms full time are women. They are largely invisibilized because, in the first place, a large number of them do not own the land. They are farm laborers who are basically from extremely oppressed communities, and they are farm workers who are very, very exploited. But they do not own the land that they till. Even those who own land are not women. So, women ownership of land, because of land laws that are extremely patriarchal in nature, women's names are usually not on the papers that own land. So while they may be the ones working the land, that is owned, they often work the land that is owned by a husband or someone else. So the thing is that why is it that is the case? The case is also because male workers of the working class there's a huge outmigration from the villages out into the cities. We saw that during the lockdown, when we saw the reverse migration back to the villages, where workers had to walk on foot for thousands of kilometers because of the sudden lockdown that Modi imposed, right? So we know the size of that migrant workforce. The ones left back at home are the women. Then you have, of course, I'm keeping an eye on the time, and Susan, I was told I have 20 minutes. So when there are 5 minutes left, could you give me a heads up? Just give me a heads up when there's 5 minutes left. And so what you have is this situation where women are the agricultural worker. Women form a very large part of the agricultural workforce. Even among the landowning sections, because of the immense farm crisis we have had, agrarian distress crisis we've had, there's been a spate of farmer suicides. And of course, women farmers have also committed suicide, but it so happens very often that the male farmers are the ones who commit suicide, and the women are left then bearing this burden of managing the farm, as well as ensuring somehow that debts are repaid and all of that alone. And because they are not officially recognized as farmers, they are not entitled to whatever little benefits that the state says that they are giving to farmers, right? Because they are not recognized. Now, what these new farm laws do, by taking away any control that the Indian farmer had in theory, is that women farmers will face far greater exclusion and discrimination in this regime. They will be expected to compete with, the Indian farmer will be expected to compete with a big corporation, which is not bound by any pressure, which can offer low prices, which can buy at high prices to begin with, and later, sell very low, which can later completely reverse this if they like, and without facing any consequences. And so women farmers know that being the most vulnerable among India's farmers, they will be the ones, facing an impossible situation and a virtual, forced exit from the farming sector. And so they have been extremely active in these protests, extremely active in the struggle. They have borne the brunt of a lot of the, crackdowns that the government has unleashed against farmers. And they're still going strong. In terms of the crackdown, I just want to mention that the violence from the state side has become worse and worse. The government has completely refused to, consider any of the, even suspend the laws partially, even to discuss any, to negotiate at all with the movement. This is a hallmark of the Modi regime, and they are essentially just going on. But the Modi regime knows that The farmers' protest is one that could affect them electorally very badly as well, and they're getting increasingly desperate. So you had a recent terrible situation where a home minister, the deputy home minister of India, it's called the Minister of Home for State, a well-known criminal man from the state of Uttar Pradesh, who was recently included in Modi's cabinet with an eye on the elections that are due in the state of Uttar Pradesh soon, and where the BJP knows it's going to find it difficult to be re-elected. There, this man, the ongoing farmers' movement, and then his son led a convoy. Are you indicating time's up? Just indicated when. Yeah. Okay, got it.
5 minutes. You have 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. There are 5 minutes left, right? Okay, sure. Okay, so so he ran over farmers and killed several farmers, and he still the farmers managed to insist and that he be arrested, and he has been arrested, and the case has been lodged. But it's a terrible killing. There are several other cases of attacks on farmers. Women students who protested at the Home Minister's house in solidarity with farmers were sexually assaulted by the police. It's a very terrible situation. Apart from that, there are other significant movements as well, which I probably won't have time to dwell on, but if there are questions, then we can take them up. Last year's movement, remarkable movement, led by Muslim women and joined by women of all kinds of classes and communities and young people across all divides, was against the new citizenship law that the Modi government introduced, which basically openly discriminates against Muslims and threatens to disenfranchise Muslim citizens, but also will affect poor people of all communities, and especially women, because it links citizenship with documentation. And in India, the poor traditionally lack documentation, and women lack documentation the most. So when the citizenship register thing has been prepared in the state of Assam, we still don't have the data in the public domain, but we know that around 20 lakh citizens were excluded from the register of citizens. And we are told that 65 to 70% of those excluded are women, because women find it extremely hard to show documentation going up several generations, because they are a woman in India traditionally, she once she's married, she moves to her husband's home. And so, finding documentation from your village where you belonged and finding documentation for your mother and your mother's mother in that fashion is nearly impossible. So women also led that movement, knowing very well, and they face terrible repression. Several feminist leaders of that movement are still in prison. And it's an absolute human rights violation, a very hard situation. There are several other movements among indigenous groups, Adivasi groups, where Adivasi women are leading struggles against climate change, floods, and being displacement due to floods, and forced acquisition of land by corporations and by the Indian government. All these things are going on, and it's a very difficult situation. So I'll just end by quickly saying, this farmers movement also, women who were taking up environmental issues, the government accused anyone who is showing solidarity with the movement of being part, they took up a tweet by Greta Thunberg, who had tweeted out a toolkit saying, if you want to support Indian farmers, then you can use this toolkit. And they used that to say that climate change activists and any young people anywhere in India showing solidarity with the farmers were basically part of a conspiracy against the state, and they are terrorists. It's a conspiracy to overthrow the Indian government, the Indian state, and that this toolkit is something dangerous. The Modi government used the phrase Andolan Jeevi, which means people who just live to do movements. We, of course, wore that as a badge of pride. We said that absolutely we are Andolan Jeevis. It's a damn good word, and it should become universal across the globe. We live for movements because we know that on people's movements depends the future of this planet, depends the future of human existence, and of course depends a better future for everyone, for our next generations and ourselves. And that is why we are all Andolan Jeevis. And we all need these toolkits because it's nothing to be ashamed of. toolkits, learning how to struggle. This is extremely important. We are going to keep sharing that across the world. And I'll end my remarks now because I think my time is up, but I'm happy to answer any questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kavita. And everyone would like to show their appreciation in some way of Kavita's talk. That'd be great. There'll be some time for questions after we hear from our other speakers. So please hold on to them. And when it comes time for discussion, we'll encourage people to pop their questions in the chat box. Or if you do want to make a short contribution or ask a question, we will endeavour to allow people to actually speak, just depending on how much we have to deal with. Okay, we really appreciate your contribution, Kavita. I'd now like to introduce Nilüfer Koç to present to us. For those of you who have followed the Kurdish struggle, the decades-long Kurdish struggle, and particularly the challenges that Kurdish people are facing around the world, but in particular in the areas of northern Syria and also in Turkey itself. The bravery and courage and inspiration of these comrades who are battling against huge odds, it just never ceases to inspire. So, Nilüfer, we're very happy to have you with us at this conference, and I'd like to welcome you to give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the Green Left and the Social Alliance to organize this very important conference. I really do believe it's true to say the capitalist system is in a crisis. Kavita was explaining the results of or the effects of the crisis of capitalism in India. I will bring you to Middle East and North Africa, how the results are being seen there. We experienced the crisis of capitalist system in form of wars and demographic changes, exploitation of all the natural resources without any law. And in these, the hegemonial power or the global powers are using Turkey mainly for destruction of any kind of alternative, particularly the alternative which are led by the Kurds. So the war between the Kurds and Turkey is not just a war between Turkey and the Kurds. Since Turkey became member of the NATO, it's become a very important strategic alliance to the Western powers for their policy of divide and rule in Middle East, because Turkey is the only Muslim state in the NATO. And since the majority of the people of Middle East are Muslims, Turkey is needed for the NATO's strategy to make another wave of changes in Middle East. The first changes happened by the European capitalism after the First World War, where then afterwards 4 nation states and nearly 22 nation states has been built for the Arabs, and then 4 nation states founded on the land of the Kurds, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. So that's why we see the Kurdish problem not just a problem between Kurds, Turks, Kurds, Arabs, and Kurds and Persians. We do believe it's a result of capitalist strategy towards Middle East. So the Kurdish question is a result of the capitalist strategy of expansionism. But I will go, I can talk a lot about the results which we are facing. So what Turkey is doing, giving some examples. So you would ask why, for example, the Kurdish people's leader Abdullah Öcalan was abducted 22 years ago, and why he is still in solitary confinement in the last 22 years, arrested under a regime of arbitrary, or why Turkey is allowed to arrest thousands of Kurdish politicians, MPs, mayors, co-mayors in Turkey, or why Turkey is allowed to use chemical weapons in the last 6 months against the Kurdish freedom fighters in northern part of Iraq. So all this has something to do that Turkey is needed today to destroy, prevent improvement of a new alternative model to the crisis of the capitalism in Kurdistan particularly. Right at the beginning in the 90s, when after the fall of the real socialism, the Kurdish movement led by PKK and its founders Abdullah Öcalan, there was questioning the reasons of the collapse of alternative strategy, which was at that time the socialist bloc. And he came then back, said, well, it wouldn't be enough just to be anti-capitalist. So the Soviet Union was clearly anti-capitalist, but it doesn't mean that they have been against capitalist modernity. So this is the key point of the changes. 30 years started in the Kurdish movement, saying we won't keep us busy with the results of capitalism, as I have explained how it is working in Kurdistan and Kavita in India. It is more important to fight the thoughts and the mentality of capitalist modernity, which is based on paradigm of power accumulation, monopolization of power, which is controlled by the nation states. This nation state is the most dangerous instrument to societies which bring them under the control of the ideas and thoughts of capitalist modernity. So Öcalan said, well, if we want freedom, it means we have to start by our own, looking in the social structures where accumulation and monopolization of power is hidden. Who created the hierarchical structures in the societies? So in the end, the societies have been constructed according to the benefits of the nation states, as we have seen, for example, in the last 90 years in Turkey, when the Turkish nation state was built for the European capitalist interest. So through nationalism, through religiousness, through sexism, society was opposed to act according to the benefits of a society, a state. The Kurds were the one next to the Armenians and the others who fought always against these opposing structures. And then Öcalan said we start to change ourselves, our mentality in our society, when we are looking for liberties, for democracy, for equality. So then we should take the mirror and look in our own society, how much we are affected by capitalist modernity. And the result was, well, we are a male-dominated society, which is actually based on the paradigm of patriarchy, which is the father of capitalism. So he said there's a need, we should go more deeper in the problem. And in this, he was discovering the freedom of women, the struggle for freedom of women as the main dynamic of overcoming the hidden form of patriarchy in each field of life, whether in politics, in art, in culture, in music, in literature, wherever you look, or even how historical books are written, even how histories has been understood, or how we are taught in history in the schools. In all this in this whole field of life, he said there's need to look to go further and look how we are affected by this paradigm, which make the first class or the second class, bringing hierarchies in the societies. And so in this, he said the one who have been excluded from capitalist modernity, which means the thought of or mentality of hegemonial, hierarchical, power-based ideology. So he said women have been excluded since 5,000 years from the system in our area, Middle East and Kurdistan particularly. So that's why the alternative is somewhere hidden in the women, in the women's traditions, cultures, thoughts, mentalities, emotions. Wherever you look, women are different in our society, less aggressive, less those who are ruling. So they have been excluded from ruling. And also historically, patriarchy starts with male domination over the mother rule society in the Kurdish history. So that's why we say there are a lot of hidden elements in the names of the Kurdish women, in the clothes. Wherever you look, you will find signals or some symbols of really ancient traditions in the Kurdish women, particularly those who are living in the mountainous areas. And there he said there's already a ground for us to implement practice new alternative model to patriarchy. So the struggle against capitalism, which is the Kurdish cause, started in Kurdistan with women's liberation in the 90s already. So when the Soviet Union was collapsing, we're questioning the reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, not giving up or being affected by capitalist modernity. Let's say further after Marx, most of the leftists were thinking nation state is needed, and also as a European form of nation state, then this step of industrialization, which was very, very important to the Soviet areas. Industrialization without any critical stance to industrialization was built everywhere, which was destroying the nature, and nobody was taking care of nature during the time of the so-called socialist bloc. So praising industrialism as a progressive progress of humanity. So all these were the lessons for us to learn from them, and so well, this mistake we shouldn't repeat in the Kurdish movement, because right at the beginning when the movement was founded, it called itself a socialist movement. And then with 90 years, with the questioning of everything, then the conclusion was, no, we can't repeat the mistakes. We should make it different. And in these, I think the women helped Öcalan to find his direction. In the 90s is already also the time when in Kurdistan uprising starts, the so-called settlements. In the Palestinian history, they're called intifadas. In Kurdistan, they're called settlements. And interestingly, most of the settlements have been led by women in the 90s. Afterwards, most of the women took part in the armed struggle, in the guerrilla movement in the mountains of Kurdistan. And then the challenge came for the PKK when thousands of women went to the mountains. It was a real challenge. So they didn't know why so many women came, and they didn't know how to deal with all these women. So it was, however, since the founding, there have been female members of the PKK. One of them was Sakine Cansız, founding member. She was assassinated in Paris in 2013. But there have been few women already in the 70s, 80s in the PKK, 90s, but through the uprisings, thousands of women went to the mountains, and it was a real challenge. So how to deal with this problem? So because they have seen the participation of women as a problem. And then the roles of the society have been repeated in the mountains. So women became the fighters and the men have been the commanders. So, and then in the parallel to this, there were ideological talks and discussions, analysis in the PKK about new form of socialism. And then Öcalan says, well, we can't speak about socialism if we don't even have a democracy between the two genders, between men and women. If women are just fighters and men are the commanders, that can't be a character of a revolutionary movement. What was happened was then dividing the army, and creating free space for women by the founding of the Women's Army in 1993. So this is a key point in the history of the Kurdish movement when we talk today about democratic confederalism or genealogy as a science of women, or the brave women who fought IS, Islamic State in North and East Syria. These all are results of this long history of the Kurdish women's movement starting in the 90s. So after the army was founded, you mustn't understand the army just as a military organization. No, it was the only place, the mountains have been the only place where men and women in the Kurdish society got the place for free education, for self-reflection, because in the cities and villages it wasn't possible, since Kurdistan is a colony under Turkey. So you couldn't move and organize yourself so easily in the cities and in the villages, but it was possible to do this in the mountains where you have been very well protected. So in this army of women, they offered women to be taught in the history of women. So that's why we changed the terminology history to her story. So founding our own history, because in the school books, we as women are not mentioned. Even in the Holy Quran, we are not mentioned. Whenever we are mentioned, we are the second class, or we are Eve, or we are Maria. We are always the passive elements in history. So that's why, to make us as active contributor to history, we say her story. It's more important to say her story because exploitation, slavery starts firstly with women in Middle East in our region. So that's why we have to go to fight this problem in the sources, going back to the history. So see that we have been existent in history as women, as Kurdish women. And this gave the women a real high level of self-confidence, which then was step by step going to analysis and the move of guerrillas in cities and villages to the society in the 90s. And then the second key point is in 96, where then Öcalan together with the women are making public call to all Kurdish men saying, kill the male in yourself. So firstly, the revolution, social revolution starting with changement of women. Women became active members of the society and autonomously organized active members of the society. Wherever the women are, they have their autonomous organization and structures. So then these whole experiences went to the civilian areas, which then led to participation of women in political parties in Turkish parliament, or wherever you go in other parts of Kurdistan is the same. And 96 is the second breaking point, is the public call for killing the male in yourself. So, and that led to very interesting discussions in the society in Kurdistan. The men have been shocked, why? Who is the male in myself? So, and that was capitalism. Catch the capitalism in yourself was the real meaning. And this discussion have been led by women together with Abdullah Öcalan. And then later on, after 2 years, this talks how to kill the male. And then the discussions with let's say the discussion starts. We need the women's ideology. We have an army, we have an umbrella organization which brings all the society to different diverse organized women's society or women's nation. And then afterwards, we need the ideology, and we will then find the party. So after all these, we have, after 30 years experience in Kurdistan, a very, very important women's power in all fields in life, not just in self-defense areas, in politics, in foreign affairs, in culture, in art, everywhere. And I would say this is the main character of new experiment in Kurdistan, how to defeat capitalism. And I think this was the right way to experiment, because when in 2000, we always, as Kurdish women, we say the 21st century will be the century of free women. And we see the crisis of capitalism as mostly affecting us as women, not just in form of wars, but the form of exploitation. Whatever you see this in different form amongst the farmers and fishers in India, in Kurdistan is happening differently. The abuse, growing rape, the state-led police of rape against Kurdish women, arrestments of Kurdish women. There are thousands of Kurdish female co-mayors, mayors, and politicians, MPs in Turkey in prison. And rape became a state official policy against Kurdish women who are active in amongst the civil society. I can add many of the examples, or what Turkey is doing in the occupied part of Afrin in North and East Syria. So women are sold as slaves to the Arab countries, which Islamic State has done in 2014 with the Yazidi Kurdish women. Now Turkey is doing the same in the city of Afrin in North and East Syria and Rojava, selling Kurdish women in this occupied part and forcing them to act according to the rule of Sharia. All these women have experienced freedom in the system of democratic confederalism, which is a democracy without state, which is a democracy which rejects centralization of power and reject accumulation of power. So it's a model of decentralization, model of grassroots democracy, in which women's freedom is the key point in killing the male as the ground of patriarchy and capitalism.
Thank you so much, Nilüfer. We will move into discussion and questions now because we've had apologies come through from Brid Smith. Unfortunately, due to a family situation, personal situation, Brid's not able to join us. So we've just had apologies sent through from Brid. So we wish Brid and her family all the best, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to hear from Brid in the future. So that does give us a little bit more time for questions and discussion with...
Thanks everybody for joining this live stream. This is a little taster for the beginning of the Eco-Socialism 2021 conference. If you are interested in attending the rest of the conference this coming weekend, please head over to the conference website, ecosocialism.org.au. If you like the work of Green Left, please become a Green Left supporter. It makes a huge difference to our work. Thanks once again for joining us tonight.